What's up guys, today we're going to be comparing two flagship phones, the Asus Zenfone 9 against the iPhone 13 Pro here. The Zenfone 9 will cost you around $750, the 13 Pro typically going for around $900 to $1,000 depending on whether you get it used or refurbished here. So let's go ahead and start off with the design because these are two of my favorite sort of smaller phones. These two phones are very easy to one hand, so that's one thing I really like about them. Now, as far as thickness, they're both almost around the same thickness. These are kind of like thick phones, and they're both kind of heavy phones as well too. So don't be fooled just because they're small. They actually do have a little bit of heft to them as well too. As you can see, the trend of having these massive cameras on here. The Zenfone 9's cameras, I think, are definitely bigger than the iPhones here, but you can see triple camera setup, which we will get into, dual camera setup. As far as the hardware on the iPhone, you do have a glass and metal design on here. In the Zenfone, it does have metal railings, but it's got, like, I guess it's kind of plastic back on it. I love the designs of both of these phones. I love this feel, kind of feels like sandpaper almost. The iPhone also has like a matte finish, so both of these phones don't pick up any fingerprints, which is something that I really appreciate about both the designs here. Now, one essential thing about the designs that you will notice is that the Zenfone 9 has a headphone jack, which is absolutely crazy for a phone that came out in 2022. So if you're a die-hard headphone jack user, you absolutely love that this phone has it. They both have stereo speakers as well too, which we will get into, and they both have different ways of getting into the phone. You do have the in-display, or not the in-display, but the physical fingerprint scanner on the Zenfone 8 versus the, Face ID on the iPhone here. So, it just really depends. They both actually work really well. Alright, so let's talk about the displays on both of these phones. So with the Zenfone 9, it's a 5.9-inch Super AMOLED display. It is 120Hz HDR10 Plus at 1100 nits peak brightness with a 5.9-inch screen size. It is 1080p 445 for the PPI. With the iPhone, it is a slightly bigger panel. You can kind of barely tell, but it is a 6.1-inch display. It is 1170 by 2532 460 for the PPI, and it's the Super Retina XDR OLED display. It is also 120Hz with HDR10 Dolby Vision, and it gets up to 1200 nits peak brightness. So both displays are obviously, fantastic displays. It really comes down to which display design you like the most because, like I said, they both are high quality panels here. I do like the Zenfone 9's display just because the punch hole that you see on the left hand side, it is less intrusive than Apple's notch for sure, which is one thing that I definitely like. But yeah, they're both very nice displays. As you can see, it just really comes down to, if this notch is going to annoy you or not. Now I will say the Zenfone 9 is definitely, it's easier to one hand, and it just feels a little bit more comfortable than the iPhone, and it's just because it's smaller. But yeah, so it really comes down to, the personal preference. Me personally, I like the punch hole display. I also like the option to toggle between 90 Hz. So on the Zenfone 9, this is something that the iPhone cannot do. Is if I wanted to save like a little bit of battery life, I could just put the refresh rate at 120 Hz. As you can see, I have my optimization on high, so it won't let me change it now. But yeah, if I go ahead and turn that off, I will be able to go ahead and do that, which is something that I really like. So let's talk about these specs a little bit more here. So on the Zenfone 9, we do have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 Plus chip, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM on here. And then we have no SD card support, of course, with Android 12 Zen UI on top. We are running iOS 15 on the 13 Pro here, and then we have the Apple A15 chip on here, of course. And we have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. You can see the iPhone does beat out the newest chip by a pretty good margin, actually. Not so much in the multi-core, but it's a pretty significant difference in the single core. Now, as far as like launching applications and overall just speed and smoothness, these are actually both very fast phones, so you really won't notice too much of a difference if you just get into like a little app launch test. Zenfone 9 actually a little bit faster there, surprisingly. But they're both very, very smooth phones when it comes to speed and just like bouncing in and out of applications. You really don't have an issue with performance on here. Just go ahead and try PUBG. Yeah, so if you are trying to game on these two phones, they do a fantastic job. Both of these phones actually manage heat very well. So I was really happy about that. Now, as far as PUBG, you can see iPhone got in PUBG super fast. Zenfone right behind it. Now, the iPhone is able to do, which this is just the optimization settings. It is able to play PUBG at 90 frames, which I don't think, I'm not sure if any Android phone can play PUBG at 90 frames yet. But this phone is capable. It really just needs a software update. But we can still do HDR Extreme. We can go up to the highest is HDR Extreme on here as well. But yeah, no 90 frames yet. But both of these phones are fantastic gaming phones, guys. They do an awesome job at gaming. So it's definitely, if you're looking for a sort of smaller phone, it really doesn't matter which phone you pick. You know, you can definitely game. So yeah, you don't have the 90 frames, but the Zenfone 9, it can play Fortnite. I don't know when Fortnite is going to come back to the App Store, if it ever does, since they're going through that lawsuit. But yeah, I mean, the Zenfone 9 will play at high settings. It can pretty much play any game you throw at it at high settings. So both these phones are very capable. Alright, so let's talk about some additional features here. So both of these phones have IP68 dust and water resistant. Like I said, they both have the NFC, and the Zenfone 9 does have a headphone jack. Obviously, the iPhone does not have a headphone jack. And yeah, so let's go ahead and test out these speakers here. Start with the iPhone max volume. So off the bat, I do notice a way more deeper and louder bass on the Zenfone 9. There's just way more clarity. I can hear the really low notes on the Zenfone 9. I think the 13 Pro might be louder, but the bass quality is nowhere near as good. Yeah, it's not even close. Yeah, so it really depends on what kind of sound you're looking for. If you want a really detailed bass, it's still pretty loud, but it's not as loud as the 13 Pro. But the 13 Pro sort of lacks the bass quality there that the Zenfone 9 is giving me. So just two awesome speakers. They're just kind of tweaked differently. I'm going to show you guys the side-by-side stills, but let's just go over the specs real quick. The 13 Pro, it does have a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, it does 3x optical zoom, and then we also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide on here as well. Two, it can shoot in 4K 24 through 60, and then we have a 12 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 24 through 60 as well too. The Zenfone 9 does have a dual camera setup on here as well, and this phone has a 50 megapixel standard on it, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot in actually 8K 24, and then we also have a 12 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 30 on here as well too. So let's go ahead and check out the side-by-side stills. Which ones do you guys prefer, the Zenfone or the iPhone? Here's the 13 Pro. .5. Do you have 3X? Alright guys, here's the video on the Zenfone 9. It's an ultra wide. Alright guys, so this might be pretty surprising to a lot of you guys. Let's talk about battery life. The Zenfone 9 has excellent battery life for this size, and so does the iPhone as well too. It's got excellent battery life as well too. I still have 100% battery health on this iPhone as well. So let's get into the battery specs. The Zenfone 9 4300 milliamp battery, 30-watt charging, and then you have reverse charging on here as well too. So the only thing that the Zenfone is missing is the wireless charging. So that is something that the iPhone does have that the Zenfone does not. But the specs on the iPhone, it does have a 3095 milliamp battery with 23-watt charging on here. So it does charge much slower than the Zenfone 9. But it's like you get that trade-off for, you know, the wireless charging and the MagSafe charging as well too. So I'm not sure why they opted to take out or not put wireless charging on here. It's kind of strange, but battery life is just awesome on both of these two phones. You can easily get well over 6 hours, 7 hours, pretty easy on here as well too. I do think the iPhone might slightly beat out the Zenfone 9 in terms of a screen on time, but like I said, for an Android phone this size that's actually smaller than this iPhone, it's pretty impressive that it's able to get such great battery life. So that's pretty much it, guys. Which phone would you guys prefer, the Zenfone 9 or the 13 Pro?